Washington is red hot on the recruiting trail.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back in to another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. You can visit FanDuel.com to get started. Lars, we got a really fun show today. We're going to just try to make some sense at edge rusher. And then we're also going to be getting into who Washington's number one outstanding recruiting target might be right now. And that's because Washington is absolutely red hot on the recruiting trail right now. They are still in pursuit of a whole bunch of blue chip prospects, headlined, in my opinion at least, by four-star wide receiver Andrew Marsh, who is on campus on Monday, or was on campus since the everyday's listening to this on Tuesday, on campus for an unofficial visit following Washington's Luau At The Lake.
Yeah, and again, the fact that these are all unofficial visits, that tells you immediately the level of interest that Andrew Marsh has. And again, speaks to what we've said over the past couple of months, that Kevin Cummings is a maniacal recruiter. And it's one of the reasons why when Jedd Fisch brought that entire offensive staff up, you looked right away at Kevin Cummings and said, okay, good. The receiver room is not going to take a dip. There's no, okay, he might be an okay recruiter, and now he'll be a good recruiter at Washington. No, it's, again, he was a good, look what he did with McMillan and all the receivers at Arizona. And now he's got the resources, just like Jedd, to come up to Washington and say, hey, look, Washington just had 3 wide receivers drafted under the last coaching staff in the first 2 days of the NFL draft. We got to uphold that tradition and make it even better. And the only way to start with that, aside from getting Chris Lawson and the guys they already have, Braden Vinespread in the class, adding another top tier receiver like Andrew Marsh to this class would be phenomenal. And I think when you talk about what we'll get into later on, but just it's not just getting 4-star talent. This is premium 4-star talent. We're talking one of the top 100 players in the country, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. I know he's up there.
That's correct.
So I'm not 80s, 70s, somewhere in that mix. But
66.
Either way, so even more so. But you're talking about getting a perennial guy that can come in right away and be a day one factor. And to me, when you look at what the receiver room is, especially after the season, it kind of is open season where after Jeremiah Hunter, I think, has 1 season left. I don't believe he has 2 seasons left, but either way, even whether he does or doesn't, the room is wide open because Giles is gone, and then you have Denzel coming back, and that's basically it, along with all the other young freshmen and redshirt freshmen that we've talked about. But none of those guys that we have seen hit the field yet in a meaningful way, especially under Jedd Fisch, so that even lends more credence to this 25 class coming in and saying, you know what, we're going to be the standard bearer now, and Audric Harris, Rashid Williams, and the other guys that they're going to sprinkle in this fall are going to match with that to build this offense moving forward.
No, you're absolutely right. And that's something that I really like, because Andrew Marsh is not the only 4-star wide receiver that Washington is currently in pursuit of. They're also really pushing hard for 4-star wide receiver Phillip Bell from Mission Viejo and down in California. And, I know we're going to get into it a little bit more later because there are a couple other guys that we want to make sure we talk about here. But I don't care about numbers at this point. If you can get those guys in the room, you figure it out later. That's the whole point of all this. You get as much talent in the room as you possibly can, and you let it play out. That's the best way to do this. And Kevin Cummings is doing an exemplary job of that. That's exactly what he's supposed to be doing. He's got Chris Lawson. He's got Deji Jose. He's got Desmond Roebuck. He's got a bunch of really exciting receivers in that group already. And just adding a couple more is not going to be a problem where, you might look at it and say 6 receivers. That's a lot. Just let it play out. I feel that's a way better way of looking at it than just saying, oh, this seems unnecessary, especially with, the scholarship increase factoring into all this, which we talked about the other day. And that's something that the more I look at it, the more I just kind of say, okay, no, this is fine. Like the more that you're willing to let this situation play out, and the more that you're willing to just see it through with, you can still take a guy like a Desmond Roebuck who might be a little bit more under the radar while taking an Andrew Marsh where, you look at him like you possibly do with Tyrone McMillan where, okay, that's a guy who's going to be out of here in 3 years where, he already is really refined. And in 3 years, we think he'll be, a high level first round, second round, third round pick. That's great. That's awesome. That's exactly what we want. So it feels like that's kind of the way they're looking at this. And you can just have some of those guys in the tank that might need a year or two to develop, which is great. I love that. And we're going to take it a step further too, because there's still other guys where, we purposely left Ladarian Clardy out of the Monday show. We wanted to make sure that we spent a lot more time talking about him when, Zac Stascausky, who's got his crystal balls to flip from Minnesota to Washington. That's a situation we're monitoring. But Clardy, who did visit over the weekend, still looks like he's in a really, really good position to choose Washington on Saturday, even though Ole Miss is still heavily in the mix.
Yeah, and think about the other factors that, again, we don't want to emphasize flips, but some of these other guys that have teammates that were previous Washington targets, we're not going to make specific players right now, but that's also a factor when you think about down the road. If, let's say, Phillip does end up deciding to choose to come to Washington, does potentially his teammate at Mission Viejo, Deshawn Lee, take another look? And I'm not saying he will or won't, but when you start to get some of these guys in the boat, and you match that with Washington starting 5-1, 4-1, maybe 6-2 in the Big Ten, that perception of Jedd Fisch, which is already pretty good as a recruiter with what he's been able to do with the class already, now players will see that in the fall and think, oh wow, okay, so Jedd can actually build an instant winner at Washington and carry on that. It won't be a national championship season, but carry on that momentum and kind of ride that ship right back up into a national championship caliber program in 25 and beyond, because that's what these guys are coming in for. They're not coming in 24. They're coming in next year. So they're using the 24 season as okay, what is Jedd going to do? And if, let's say, which we don't expect, let's say Jedd goes 2-2 in his first 4 games, or, 2-4, which neither of us don't think is going to happen. But if that does happen, then that would lend credence to, okay, well, maybe recruits are going to look elsewhere. But it really seems that it speaks to the segment we're having where Washington is just red hot in every single way, shape, or form on the recruiting trail and coming into fall camp. You have to imagine that momentum and just kind of good vibes and positive flow is going to carry into the season, which is only going to help on the recruiting trail.
Absolutely. And there's one other name that, I don't know how I feel about this, but, people who are a little bit more in the know on that than we are have said that Madden Faraimo, the 4-star linebacker from J. Sarah Catholic, who, mentioning teammates, is teammates with 3-star offensive line commit Jake Flores, where he's still considering Washington. He's got some crystal balls to Notre Dame. I still think that they're the heavy favorite there with, Texas is involved, USC is involved, but then that 4th team is Washington. And it's one of those guys that the more I look at it, it's just, the momentum is building. It's moving downhill. And that position especially is one that I'm looking at where, we've talked about Donovan Robinson and his potential, and Zadris Rainey-Sale, obviously, and Jonathan Epperson as well, who are 2 of the headliners in this class. But getting another guy in there like Faraimo, all of a sudden those 4 guys that you're losing who are all out of eligibility after this season, all of a sudden you don't care. Like, with all due respect to Carson Bruner and Alfonso Tupatala, who we love on this podcast, it makes their departure a lot easier when you have an equally talented 4-star kid from in-state coming in. And Zadris Rainey-Sale, I love Jonathan Epperson at multiple positions. If he moves to safety full-time, I'm never going to be shocked by that. But then, if you're able to go out there and get a guy like Madden Faraimo, who's still showing strong interest in the program, it lends credence to another very, very strong recruiter on the staff that you and I have discussed in Robert Bala. And that's another one who, he spent some time at Alabama under Nick Saban and has clearly learned his ways on the recruiting trail, which is really great to see. And he's been cleaning up really with a lot of his top targets. He's done a really great job with a lot of these guys. And Lars, we keep using the term top targets. The question still remains, though, who is the number 1 remaining target on Jedd Fisch's coaching staff's board? And we'll get there right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel's an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and speaking of Major League Baseball, since we're recording this on Monday prior to the Mariners Red Sox series, I got to say to all my Seattleites out there that love the Mariners and still all in, especially after the Justin Turner trade, I'm quite devastated with the way the Red Sox Yankees series turned out over the weekend. And if you've got FanDuel, I really like Mariners money line over the next couple of days at Fenway Park. Their pitching is just too good, and as good as the Red Sox offense has been, that was a crushing blow. So Lars, you and I had a fun debate about this pre-show because we both wanted to bring one of these guys to the table, and we were really curious if we were going to choose the same person or not, and we didn't, which is great. And I'm going to let you have the lead here.
Well, so it's a perfect segue from the first segment, because the one thing that's ironic about this 2025 recruiting class is it's actually defensive heavy. When you think about the top commits, it's Jonathan Epperson. It's not Jonathan. It's Zadrian Sale. It's Jonathan Epperson. It's a lot of defense. Now, there's plenty of 4-stars on the offensive side, Brandon Washington, et cetera. But the one thing that we're really looking at the back end to round out this class is a top flight safety. And I know one guy that you like to compliment well to, Ladarian Clardy is the guy who I'm talking about, to be very clear, out of Escambia High School in Pensacola, Florida. For me, has to be the top target, because when you look at what this class has already, you got a good nickel, potentially nickel safety, whatever you want to call him, Jonathan Epperson. You got some good outstanding cornerbacks on the outside. You just got Rylan Dillard-Allen from Arizona, who's a good ball hawking safety in his own right. But you need one more safety to pair with him. And when you look at Ladarian Clardy on film, perfect kind of guy to come in. I'm not sure necessarily if he'd be like a guy that could guaranteed play all 12 games, 13 games as a true freshman, but I don't think it's necessarily a far cry to see him go for it. And I think one guy that you compared him a lot to is Sean Parker. And he was a guy that was another 4-star who came in out of Narbonne back under the Sarkisian days, way back yonder year. And it's even more important than that, because I remember when Sean Parker committed to Washington, you think, okay, it's a big 4-star get out of California. Washington was like a 6-6 program at the time, just kind of on the come up. Now you're talking about going into the state of Florida for one of the top 200 kids in the country and a top 20 player in the state of Florida who has offers from Florida State, turned down Florida, turned down Miami, and several other schools. He had 43 offers, and Washington's made it down to 5. If that tells you anything, now again, Hanson is included in that. There's some other smaller schools included in that 43 offer list, but
no, I was just saying, let's be real. Washington's made it down to 2. they have made it down a lot, a lot further than 43, as you are the number one, the number one agenda pusher for in all the best ways. And I think that lends so much. I know we mentioned it briefly. He is visiting Ole Miss on Wednesday before his commitment date, which is set for Saturday, which, we'll be all over on Locked On Huskies. And especially if you remember the insider program, whenever we get some little nuggets, we're dropping those in there as well. So make sure you sign up in the link down below for that as well. But I love everything you said, and I agree. I wrote an article over on Huskies Wire about all those things, but you could say all the same things about Andrew Marsh as well. And I feel that it almost goes a step further with Andrew Marsh, and I've been completely in your corner, and I still am, pushing the Ladarian Clardy to Washington agenda. It's awesome. That would be such an awesome get for this program. But as awesome as that is, would you rather have a top 20 player from Florida or a top 10 player from Texas? And that part of the agenda is one thing, just the optics, how awesome that looks. Like, I'm going to take you back to a couple years ago, where unfortunately the situation didn't work out the way that you thought it would, with injuries and everything like that. But remember when Anthony James committed to Washington, and at the time he was still rated as a top 100 player. He was, and of course, like I said, injuries, a couple other things, just ended up derailing what could have been a really promising career at Washington. And at the time, that was the life that Washington really needed on the recruiting trail. Now let's take that step further, because not only would Andrew Marsh do that exact same thing, but I'm going to comp him to him again, to Tyrone McMillan. Look at what this offense truly can be like with a 1A. Right now, you and I both legitimately believe that 1A is going to be Denzel Boston. And that's awesome. Now, to quote Ted Lasso, let's get 2 aces in here. Let's see what that looks like. Where Andrew Marsh, if you could get Denzel Boston back for another season, all of a sudden you're cooking with gas here.
Great segue, because that feeds perfectly back into my. And again, nothing you said is wrong. And to answer your question, when I want a top 10 from Texas or a top 20 from Florida, the reason why I'm going to say a top 20 from Florida, and you can't, no wrong answer to choose a top 10 from Texas, but the reason why I would choose the top 20 from Florida is because what is Steve Belichick's defense predicated upon? You want the corners to be able to press outside and stand on an island, which means those two high safeties really have to have an impact. And you have Ryland, Dillard, and Allen, but having a second one like Ladarian Clardy, who already plays top flight high school football in the state of Florida, easily can make an impact anywhere he goes in any program. That's why Ole Miss is so coveting him heavily. But I think it's also why Vinny Cincinnati, as a former NFL player, made such an impression to get him. And it really seems like Vinny has gone out of his way to build up that relationship. And obviously, in a way, you kind of have to if you're a coach at Washington, 25 plus 100 miles away on the other kitty corner on the other side of the country from where Pensacola, Florida is. But I think it also just speaks to, and it's not that they didn't want Ryland Dillard down. I'm not saying anything about that. I'm just saying it really seems like Vinny is emphasizing, hey, Ladarian, you are going to be the cherry on top, the guy that really closes out this class, so that whatever happens with the cornerbacks can look better when you have two top flight safeties over the top. And I think also when you look at no disrespect, right? But that's just a fact of the matter. And when you look at the cornerback room, there's a plethora of young players at the cornerback room. There is some at safety as well, which will, Raheem Wright, et cetera, Rashawn Clark, and et cetera, et cetera.
Peyton Waters,
but that's also what Peyton. Again, we can go down the list. There's tons of young names on this, but this is also why you get all this talent in the room. You look at Alabama, you look at Michigan. It's one thing Jedd talks about all the time. Year in and year out recruiting at a top level. You can't just say, oh, hey, well, we got a 4-star in Rashawn Clark last year, this past class, so we don't need a 4-star for another 2 or 3 classes or another class or 2. We can kind of wait and load up the depth as it would be under maybe a former coach back in the day. No, you need to get 4-star after 4-star after 4-star, which again also does lend credence to your point of, okay, well, did we get a 4-star receiver in the 24 class? I don't necessarily think Audric Harris was a 4-star. So now again, respect to talent in his own right.
They have all those guys have the talent to be, and because Jason Robinson, Justice Williams, especially but everything you said just also plays perfectly back, and that's why this is a fun discussion. Where everything you just said also plays perfectly back into the wide receiver and the Andrew Marsh conversation, where it's a cherry on top sort of thing. Where having all the other guys in the room is awesome. It looks great. You can do so many different things with all the guys that are in the room right now. But don't you want to just have that extra piece, that extra over-the-top sort of piece? Because here's a fun example for you. Rome Odunze, Jalen McMillan, and Jalen Polk are awesome. But you know what made that group even better? Having Jeremy Bernard behind them as well. Knowing that Denzel Boston was sitting there waiting in the wings if something happened. That's what depth is. That's what recruiting is all about. Washington built the best wide receiver room in the country. They built a truly historic wide receiver room. I'm not saying that's what this is going to be, but that's what you always look for. That is the goal of recruiting. That's what it's all about. And Andrew Marsh can tie that together because, if we're looking back on this class, and this plays into something we talked about the other day as well. We're looking back on this class in 3 years, right? We're looking back on, oh, wow, yeah, Deji Jose ended up being a really, really impactful player. I'm surprised he wasn't, just a bona fide top 200 consensus guy. Like Chris Lawson, oh, that's a dude that's making plays all over the field. When you line him up inside, line him up outside. That's awesome. That's great. And then, oh, Andrew Marsh was in that class too. That's wild. That's amazing. Like it's the same thing about looking at what this wide receiver room could have been if Puka Nacua was still around in 2022. It's that level of aspiration. Is that what it's going to be? Absolutely. Like, who knows? I don't want to say absolutely not, because who knows what it could really look like with all these guys, with the coaching, with a whole bunch of different factors that are out of your control. But that's the goal. And I completely agree with you. And I'm not saying that, the talent is already there at corner and safety, because there certainly is a lot, but it's the same thing. There are a lot of questions. But the more that I look at it, the more that I know that Jedd Fisch has predicated himself on running an elite offense, a top flight offense. Why not go get an amazing playmaker?
Nothing you said was wrong, but what did the 2023 season and specifically the national championship prove? Offense wins games, defense wins championships.
Absolutely,
you
yeah.
go and get the safety.
That's why you need to go get
anything.
A Mason Graham, which would be really nice.
Well, I was going to say, I'm just specifically, obviously, Ladarian Clardy is not a Mason Graham type, but it still speaks to everyone. Because again, what did Jimmy, the Chris Peterson, and Jimmy Lake, to give full credit, no, you can have a decent front four, but if you have a great secondary, that front seven looks a lot better with a strong back end. And you can kind of mask. Now, again, 2021 would argue otherwise, but we just forget that whole year.
No, Lars, there are a lot of good points that you can make for both guys. And it's fun because both the arguments we just had played right into the other one. And I think that's great. I think that's, one of the reasons that we love doing the show every day. And with that being said, we really need to make sense of the edge rusher position. And we'll get there right after a message from our good friends over at Ibotta, because it's summertime, which means it's barbecue season. And you can stock up on all your grilling favorites and earn cash back on every purchase when you use Ibotta, so you don't have to choose burgers or hot dogs. You can get both. Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. You can earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight you've been eyeing, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much. With Ibotta, you earn cash back that you can withdraw to your bank account, PayPal, or gift card. Simply add offers in the app, upload your receipt, and voila, the money is yours. It's time you joined over 50 million users who use Ibotta to earn cash back every time they shop. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKDOWNCollege when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app and start earning cash back and use code LOCKDOWNCollege. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use code LOCKEDONCollege. And we've also got a message from our good friends over at Factor. It's time that you fuel up for the warmer, sunnier days ahead with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. You can meet your wellness goals in time for summer thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto, with 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week. You'll always have new flavors to explore. You can crush your wellness goals with dietitian-approved meals and ingredients that you can trust, which is great for somebody like me because I love the Protein Plus option. I try to work out as often as I possibly can, and I don't always have time to fuel up the way that I properly should. You can keep kitchen time to a minimum. Factor meals are ready in 2 minutes. There's no shopping, prepping, cooking, or cleaning up, which I love as well. Doing the dishes, it just takes too long sometimes. You can enjoy effortless support for your lifestyle. You can choose from 6 menu preferences to help you manage calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meat, or simply eat well balanced. You can head to factormeals.com/LockdownCollege50 and use code LockdownCollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code LockdownCollege50 at factormeals.com/LockdownCollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. So a little backstory here for all the Everdares. We were, we're doing our normal brainstorming, coming up with ideas for this show. And you and I were talking about the edge rusher position. And I just published something over on Huskies Wire about predicting the depth chart. And Lars, we were just kind of looking at each other like, this doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense, and not in a bad way. It's just there are so many guys that all do the same things, and they all have a nice level of experience. And the more we look at it, the more we're just kind of like, who's actually going to emerge from this group?
Yeah, and well, I mean, it really adds a wrinkle into it when I told you that Jedd Fisch pointed out that Russell Davis gained 20 pounds in the offseason, which makes it another guy at the edge rusher position where it's like, okay, great. Now he's from 225 to 245. Great. So it's just another big body, that can potentially set the edge, but hasn't necessarily shown that at a consistent level. More so been a true pass rusher, speed rusher at Arizona. But I think that also lends credence to what Jason Kawusi and Steve Belichick want to do with this defense. And it's one thing that we've talked about both on and off the show, where what is the NFL predicated upon? Wave after wave after wave after wave of fresh bodies at edge rusher. And especially in college, that is the perfect scenario to be in, where you're not pinned down to 1, 2, or 3 guys. And if, let's say, Zach Durfee's not going and, Lance Holtzclaw's not going, great. Now who's your options? You still got Jason Wade. You still got Deshawn Lynch. Still got X, Y, Z, A, B, and C.
Right.
So you have plenty of options to roll with, and you're not pinned down into great. Now we got to play a bunch of freshmen because the upperclassmen that we have aren't getting the job done. That's why you went out and got a guy like Jason Wayne, who, while didn't have the best season at Miami, still has plenty of time to develop in Steve Belichick's scheme this season. And I think it'd be a fair expectation to see him in a decent amount of games this season. Now, how many sacks does he have? So be it. But I think you're going to see a lot of rotation, especially in the month of September at the edge rusher position. Maybe not so much with Durfee, just because once he's able to show what he is, I think that just kind of speaks for itself. But with Lance Holtzclaw, where he's got a sack to his credit, but not a ton of game reps, right? In terms of starting game reps, I should say. But you can kind of go on down the rest of that list where Deshawn Lynch started at Sacramento State, but we talked about it. Is he going to have more snaps inside or outside? And I think a lot of this is going to be how many of these edge rushers are going to be able to slide in and play 3-tech or, just be an extra fifth down lineman, and how many are true going to be run setting edge.
Yeah.
Yeah. But either way, but the point is having a multitude of bodies and options that can look and do similar things, but also do slightly different things. I think that's the whole point of when you start to look at how again, you're not wrong. We're saying, how is this going to work? But I think it's a good question to have instead of saying, ooh, it's like again, when we talk about the spring where it's how is this going to work with the offensive line with 5 able bodies? It's no, how are we going to make all these snaps work with 7-8 guys that could potentially earn reps? I think that's a better problem to have than anything else.
Absolutely. I was doing some math there in my head when you said who can all play 3-tech. Got Deshawn Lynch, Tunuufi, which we've seen as as a pass rusher as well, and then Jacob Lane, because we've seen that as well. Where I think those are 3 guys who could all take some snaps on the interior. And then I love hearing that Russell Davis is up to 245, 250, because that just adds another, big body in the mix where all of a sudden he weighs around the same that Maurice Himes does. And Maurice Himes is somebody who I've had players tell me that's somebody that they're really hoping that can just, take the next step in his development and become a really strong edge setter. Where, obviously you and I have talked about Deshawn Lynch filling that role and doing that job. And I'm glad that you mentioned all these guys. One name that I know you didn't leave off, for any particular reason, is Isaiah Ward, where that's another guy who is somebody that you need to make sure is, I in my opinion at least, at the forefront of some of these conversations, which just muddies the waters even more. It just makes it all more confusing, which again, none of this is bad. It's just there are so many guys that do so many different things. And I think Isaiah might be that first guy off the bench, because right now I've got the starters as Zach Durfee and Deshawn Lynch. And I think Isaiah Ward is the next guy up. He started 11 games at Arizona last season. He had 4.5 sacks, I believe it was. And just the more I look at him, one thing that you and I watched him do wasn't just, rush the passer from, the 9 or from a couple other different spots along the defensive line. Was he walked out into the slot. He walked out and was playing in coverage from time to time, where there were a lot of different things that we saw from him where it's, like that's how you want to use these guys. Okay. That's fun. I like that. You can certainly make that work. And I mean, I can see him doing that. I can see Lance Holtzclaw doing that. I can see Russell Davis, depending on what he moves like at that weight, doing that as well. Where Jayden Wayne, same thing. Where if you're letting these guys just, get a healthy rotation and they're doing a little bit of everything, awesome. And if I mean this, in the best possible way, I think that the best version of this defensive line, because we've talked about it being, potentially one of the sleepers in the conference, just in terms of a position group. I think the best version of this defensive line is all 8 of these edge rushers. They all play 12 games like that. Obviously, you want everybody to stay healthy, but that means that not only did nobody outright win a job, which I don't mean as a bad thing, but that just means that everybody found a way to contribute in one way or another. And, from spending a very long time watching Belichick defenses, if you're able to earn their trust, that just means the world in terms of what they're going to do for you on the field, even if it doesn't show up in the stat sheet.
No, you're not wrong. And I think one thing to also consider why Ward would be the first guy off the bench is because, to your point about being able to drop into nickel, he's shown that he can drop back in coverage or at least play athletically in space and not have to just be a pure pass rusher. And I think when you start to talk about disguising looks and things like that, which I know the coaches don't want to ever get into, but just knowing what other looks you're going to throw, and you're not just going to always have your pass rushers rushing, and just go watch NFL teams and not just the Patriots, but just NFL pass rushers are not just pass rushers. You kind of have to do a multitude of different things. That's why having those athletic bodies like Holtzclaw and Ward really do offer a second layer, because Durfee is his own kind of pass rusher. And I think Deshawn Lynch in his own right is his own kind of defensive end edge rusher. But having those athletic guys behind them, and then you still add behind that Jayden Wayne, and the list goes on and on that we've talked about. It's really going to be intriguing to see. I think it's more or less going to be who ends up getting the most reps, aside from the obvious two of Lynch and Durfee. Who are the next four highest snap guys? Probably Ward and Holtzclaw. But then really the next two behind it, is it Davis? Is it Lane? There's so many options to choose from, and it's a good problem to have if you're Washington, Steve Belichick.
All right. Just because you said that, we're going to get out of here on a bold prediction. Who do you think is going to be that next guy after Durfee and Deshawn Lynch? Because I've got mine, and if you need a second to think, I'm gonna say mine right now.
But I would say Holtzclaw, just because of his athleticism, and he's gotten the ability. And he's had the. Now again, it's not with this defensive scheme, but I think he's kind of that guy where he doesn't need. If you give him 200 snaps, he could easily have 5+ sacks. And he's a guy where he doesn't need a whole. He's shown that in his time at Washington. He doesn't need a ton of opportunity to make an impact.
So I completely agree with everything you said, and I love Lance. I think he's going to have a fantastic year. I truly do. But I'm going to just copy and paste your explanation, and I'm going to put it on Tunuufi, who is in his final year of eligibility. And I think that this is somebody where, because of his ability to play on the inside, think about what we saw last year. When they went to the NASCAR package, when they went to those speed packages, who was one of the first guys we saw trot out of the field every single time? It was Tunuufi, where he can play on the inside. You don't necessarily need to take him off the field. You can put him on the outside as an edge rusher. He's not necessarily going to be the best against the run just because he's a little bit undersized, but that's okay, because that dude just wreaks havoc. Where, if we're getting down towards the end of the year and I told you that Tunuufi led this team in pressures, would you be shocked? I wouldn't be. Not by a long shot. I think that's one of the most exciting things about Voy, where I certainly would expect it to be Zach Durfee, but if it's Voy, I certainly would be shocked. Is more the point I was trying to make there. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you all every day for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. And if you want to hear more from us, like we said with those recruiting rumors, we're dropping some of those as early as we possibly can over on our Locked On Huskies Insider program, which the link is down in the description for all that. If you want to just stay up to date on the latest news, rumors, practice reports, because we're going to be getting those one-on-one conversations with us, access to exclusive Q&As, access to exclusive interviews that we're going to be recording from Washington's just fall practices, from any particular media days, any other things that we might be at, where you're not going to find those anywhere else. You're only going to find those over on the Locked On Huskies Insider program. So go check out the link down in the description below. We promise that you are going to absolutely love it. And with that being said, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating the channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. And if you got any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. If you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you on Wednesday.